Joe Harding walks into the bank with the same slow, tired step he's made the last few weeks. He wants a straight answer. Why does his mortgage notice say foreclosure? Why has his monthly payment shot up to 3 times what it was? The bank manager slides a paper across the desk and points at the figures. The promotion that cut his interest ended, the manager says. That's the reason. Joe asks for clarity. The manager repeats the policy, then shrugs. When Joe reminds him that the bank employee who sold him the loan promised the rate was unlikely to rise.
You are on our teaser rate promo, which expired back in January. That's why it's called a teaser rate. Right? It doesn't last. Makes sense. The new rate is quite a bit higher, so the monthly mortgage payment jumped up.
You did.
The manager's face goes blank. You told me this was safe, Joe says, voice tight. I told you how it works, the manager says, the kind of line meant to close a conversation. Joe lives with his grown daughter Rachel and his granddaughter Brooklyn. Their life runs on a tight budget.
I can't lose my house.
Not to worry, you're on the yellow notice. The red one is more weighty.
Losing the house would topple everything. Joe leaves the bank with the notice in his hand and an anger that won't sit quiet. He goes back to the lobby and waits to talk to the manager again. While he's standing there, voices swell behind him. 3 robbers burst in wearing masks. They move fast, firm, practiced. They shout orders. Everyone except the tellers must lie down, raise both arms and legs, freeze in a pose that makes you look ridiculous and helpless. People do as they're told. Nervous whimpers fill the air. The bank manager begins to complain, to plead. One robber snaps at him to shut up. Joe's legs cramp in that odd way old men's muscles do, and he calls out that he can't hold the position. The robber glances down at him and, after a moment, lets him sit up. Joe hands the robber the foreclosure notice, like some small offering. When the robbers take the envelopes and the manager's keys, Joe notices a tattoo on one man's neck. It's a single phrase. The robber reads the notice and mutters something that catches Joe off guard. They owe something to the people who built this place. He gives Joe a small handful of cash, just enough to look like charity, and walks out with the others. No grand speech, no torching of the place, no victims harmed. He leaves as if he's put a plaster on a wound and walked away. After the police arrive and the shock eases, Joe gives a statement. He tells the officer about the tattoo. He suggests tracking down the parlor that made it tattoos can be traced by the artist's hand.
If you find the tattoo parlor, then you'll find the artist and you've got yourself a bank robber.
The FBI agent on the scene smiles at Joe with a mix of thanks and condescension. Still, the agent files the note away. Rachel and Brooklyn pick Joe up from the station. Brooklyn fires the kind of questions kids love. What did the robber look like? Did he have cool boot?
You know you find the tattoo artist.
You find the criminal.
Did he really hand over cash? She's delighted by the story. Rachel presses Joe for the practical side. Will they lose the house? Later that night, Joe watches the news and hears the same FBI agent repeat the tattoo description.
We believe these individuals use the same tattoo artist. If we can find this artist, then we can find our perp.
Hey, that's what we said.
What an asshole.
Language.
Joe hears his own words on TV and feels the odd mix of being ignored, then later seen. The next morning, Joe meets his 2 old friends, Willie Davis and Albert Garner. The 3 of them play pong, the way they have for years late afternoons at the senior center, with coffee and a little trash talk. They discuss the robbery and agree it was cleanly done. All 3 men have worries. Letters from the old factory's pension office arrived in the same week. The factory is moving production overseas. Pensions are frozen during the transfer. The money they counted on looks suddenly uncertain. That evening at the diner, the men drift from gossip to plan. Joe's foreclosure notice sits on the table like a challenge. Willie jokes darkly about extreme measures. Joe pauses, breathes, then says plainly he's been thinking about robbing a bank. He lays out the logic without flourish. They've been cheated by systems that never face consequences. They worked hard, saved where they could, paid into promises. Now their nest eggs are gone. Prison, Joe says, might sound bad, but it would provide food, shelter, and medical care, things that matter more now than a clean record. They all know how to do practical work. None of them are fools. So why not take a shot at their own rescue? Willie's eyes light at the idea. Albert laughs at first. Then, when the reality of the letters hits him, he stops laughing. After a long silence, he concedes. They call in a favor from an old contact, Jesus, owner of a pet shop who has a past and still keeps it in the shadows. They promise him a cut. Jesus listens, sizes up their plan, points out risks, then nods slowly. Joe's quiet speech about having nothing left to lose sells it. Jesus will help. The three men decide to test the water. They pull a silly theft at a supermarket where Annie, a woman Albert knows, works. They don't plan to hurt anyone. It's a rehearsal for timing and nerves. Albert is supposed to stay in the car, but curiosity drags him along. Annie spots him and flirts like she always did. She helps them pick groceries, and he panics with a charm that's almost sweet. Willie and Joe try to steal the food and slide out to the car. Only the driver's seat is empty. Joe grabs an electric scooter from a customer to make an escape fit for their bodies. The security guard whistles. Willie hops into a shopping cart. There's a chase that ends in flour in faces and a calm request from the manager to not become his problem again. He hands them discount coupons and warns them with a tired look.
He was chasing me. When somebody chases me, I run. That's the way it works.
Never in all my years has anybody ever walked off with a whole pork loin.
Albert calls them hopeless and leaves in a huff, which is exactly the reaction they wanted. He's still in, but he wants to put them through work. Word comes that the pension accounts are being seized by the bank itself. That final theft pushes Albert over the line. He meets Annie again, and she presses him to stop hiding from pleasures. They have dinner. They end the night together and wake with a quiet, private happiness. Albert joins the plan the next morning with a different kind of steel. They bring Jesus into the loop. He lays down the clear rules. A robbery is dangerous. The consequences are severe. Yet he respects their courage and offers help the way a professional does, with details. They learn the building's camera angles, prepare a getaway van, exercise to look less vulnerable, and set up alibis. They train with fake guns. Jesus stresses the same thing again. If anyone dies, the line between a desperate plan and a crime that ruins lives occurs. They agree. If cops arrive, they'll surrender. The ethic is simple. They want money, not blood. The morning of the job, Joe makes sure the last things at home are in order. He teaches his former son-in-law to make a decent breakfast. It's a quiet, practical lesson about a life that might need carrying on. Then Joe gives Brooklyn a long goodbye. She's 14 and trying to be grown, but she clings. And he tells her he will ask for one favor, to trust him a little. He leaves with a hug that's almost a benediction. To cement their alibis, they volunteer at a charity fair. They man booths and hand out flyers, then slip away when the moment calls for it. They change into masks. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. They take on the old style of cool and step into the bank. Guns are fired into the air, and the panic is real but orderly. They demand cash, and the tellers fill the bags as instructed. A little girl in the lobby hands over her doll, believing grown-ups know what to do. Willie kneels and tells her about his granddaughter to soothe her. He suddenly goes pale and collapses. She almost pulls at his mask to help him breathe, and she sees the necklace watch he wears with his granddaughter's face on it. The manager lunges for a guard's gun that fell, and in the scramble fires wildly. The manager's shots are reckless, but miss. Joe bluffs with a gun he told his friends were blanks. The manager is terrified. They order everyone to count down from 90 to 1 and to stay down. Then they get on the van and split up. They execute the plan with a tension that belongs to men who have counted every risk and decided to go forwards. They meet later to celebrate in a small restaurant where Albert plays the sax. Drinks loosen their muscles, and their laughter is loud and guilty. Willie's chest tightens again. He jokes it off, but the look in his face is a reminder of the stakes. The FBI picks up the case. The same agent who once wrote Joe off goes through footage and notes details. One robber is dark-skinned and moves like someone who's been on his feet for decades. Joe and Albert drive to the hospital to see Willie. The doctor tells them he needs a kidney transplant urgently. The timing, his health, and the theft adds a private pressure no plan counted on. Willie watches news clips of the bank manager on TV,
Barrage of shots at them, and they were able to evade all the bullets.
describing the robbers as younger and sprier than they are. Joe and Albert flare with anger. The manager's words feel like a mockery. The supermarket manager, who'd forgiven them, now studies the footage again. He calls the FBI. The way the men moved and their height matches the trio. The agency arrests Joe and Albert. Willie stays in the hospital for treatment. At questioning, they stick to the alibi project. The fair, the booths, the man with dementia who remembers seeing them, the waitress who saw them hand out flyers. It's coherent, and the FBI agent, good at his job, admits it looks looks tight. At the hospital, the agent pulls a small trick to test memory. He wheels in a group of elderly men, some lookalikes, and brings the little girl who had almost uncovered Willie that day. She walks down the line, squints, and names that the man she spoke to isn't there. The girl's memory is clear, and the agent is left with a quiet, sinking doubt. Joe's face is a mixture of relief and suppressed grin. The test backfires. Instead of pinning them, it points away.
I don't see him.
What?
He's not here.
Are you sure?
Yep, I'm positive. I got a great memory.
Later, Joe sits in the diner while Jesus brings in a pet carrier with a puppy. Jesus says he's taking care of the shots and the paperwork. Joe asks the casual question about the money. Jesus shakes his head and says he gave the cash away because that's how things should be. Joe remembers the robber's words about paying back the older generation and realizes the phrase matches Jesus' tone more than coincidence. He asks quietly if the tattoo was real. Jesus says it was henna applied to mislead the investigators. The FBI agent walks in to return Joe's wallet that had been logged into evidence. Joe introduces the agent to Jesus as the man who runs the dog shelter. The three men exchange polite words. The agent leans into the crate and coos at the puppy, completely unaware that bundles of cash are taped to the crate's top, hidden by a blanket. Joe smiles, hands the agent the pup, and says he's taking it home for his granddaughter. The agent volunteers to help carry it, and he does, happy and naive. Back at the diner, Joe tucks a napkin over the check and leaves his usual small change, this time a stack of hundreds hidden beneath. The elderly center gets a surprise donation. The men's neighborhood gets a small set of checks deposited for community support. These aren't brags. They're the quiet way the men patch a life that had holes ripped in it. Albert agrees to donate his kidney. Willie's surgery is scheduled and performed. The recovery is long but steady. The friends sit beside the hospital bed and talk about silly things, about music and how jazz can fix a tired soul. Brooklyn hugs the new puppy, named after a musician, and the child's schoolwork still gets top marks. Joe thinks about the price they paid and the debt they felt owed. Later, at Albert and Annie's wedding, everyone raises a glass. Willie's daughter and granddaughter sit near the front. Brooklyn's father shows up. There is a small, awkward reconciliation. The three friends stand on a bridge after the party. Albert jokes that he's married and can't quite believe it. Willie, lighter in spirit now that his health is steadier, laughs with a mouth that's a little softer. Joe watches them both and feels the kinship of their shared survival. On the bridge, Joe looks out at the water and thinks how life had narrowed and then, unexpectedly, widened again. Their theft never felt like a cinematic thrill or a moral line to cross. It felt like a solution found by men who'd been pushed to the edge and chose to help each other rather than crumble. They learned about risk and guilt, about giving, and about small mercies. They learned that sometimes the system fails the people who built it, and that sometimes people have to rewrite the rules for themselves. In the end, Joe's voice carries not as a sermon, but as a simple report from a man who had been through it. He speaks of gratitude for friends who stayed, for a granddaughter who is stubborn and bright, for second chances that arrived in odd forms. He tells the story not as a boast, but as a notice. Life is short. People you love depend on you, and the people who matter are the ones who stand when things get hard. He watches Albert and Willie walk back toward the party and decides that for once he will hold on to the house and the small, safe world inside it. He will keep the puppy at his knee, and when Brooklyn's father shows up at dinner, Joe will give him a second chance too. The small, messy repairs of life are the ones that finally count.